Hello, everyone. Today we're going to continue our discussion of radicals, and today we're going to divide. So just like with multiplying, we can multiply and divide numbers outside by numbers outside and numbers inside by numbers inside, if possible. We never want to make underneath the radical be a fraction or a decimal. So we're going to divide the numbers on the outside. 35 by 35 is 7. And then if we can, the numbers on the inside. So 24 divided by 3 is 8. So that's radical 8. Now we need simplify. 8 has a perfect square factor of 4. So 8 is radical 4 times radical 2. Square root of 4 is 2. So it's 7 times 2, radical 2. So our final answer is 14 radical 2. So let's take a look at these. So radical 72 divided by radical 2, I can divide those. 72 divided by 2 is 36. It's square root of 36 because they're underneath until I take square root. Square root of 36 is 6. Number 2, 3 over 6, I can reduce that fraction to be 1/2. Then I can divide 54 by 3. Oh, wait. Yes, I can. It's 18. So that's radical 18. Now I need to simplify radical 18. 18 has a perfect square factor of 9. So that's radical 9, radical 2 over 2. Square root of 9 is 3. So it's 3 radical 2 over 2. I cannot divide the radical 2 by 2 because the one's under, the other one is not. Number 3. I can't divide 18 by 25. However, I can simplify the numerator and the denominator separately. So 18 has a perfect square factor of 9, so it's 9 radical 2 over square root of 25. Square root of 9 is 3, so that's 3 radical 2 over the square root of 25 is 5, and that is simplified. Number 4. 21 is on the outside of the radical. 40 is under the radical. 5 is under the radical. So I can divide 40 by 5, which is radical 8. They stay under the radical until I take the square root. 8 has a perfect square factor of 4. So that's radical 4 times radical 2. Square root of 4 is 2. So it's 21 times 2, radical 2. So my final answer is 42 radical 2. I want you to pause and try number 5 and 6. So 5, I divide 21 by 7, which is 3. I can divide 180 by 2, which is the square root of 90, because those are both still underneath the square root. Square root of 90 has a perfect square factor of 9, so it's 3 radical 9, radical 10. Square root of 9 is 3, so it's 3 times 3, radical 10. So it's 9 radical 10. Number 6, 30 divided by 6 is 6. 108 divided by 2 is 54, so it's 6 square root of 54. Need to look at 54. Does 54 have any perfect square factors? So 54 has perfect square factor of 9, so that's 6 radical 9, radical 6. Square root of 9 is 3, so it's 6 times 3, radical 6. 6 times 3 is 18, so it's 18 radical 6. That's dividing. Now, with all of these, we were able to get the square root out of the denominator. However, for it to be in simplest radical form, you cannot have a square root in the denominator. So what if you can't? If we can't, we do this process called rationalize the denominator. So to rationalize the denominator, I multiply the numerator and denominator by whatever the radical is in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply by radical 2 over radical 2. I always have to multiply top and bottom because it's just like when I have fractions. So this, in the numerator, I get 3 radical 2 over the square root of 4, or 2, because remember, the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 equals 2. So my final answer is 3 radical 2 over 2. So example 2 says, don't worry, break up the big radical into 2 smaller ones. So square root of 2/5 is square root of 2, or the square root of 5. Can take square root of top and bottom. Then I need to get rid of the radical 5 in the bottom, so I multiply the square root of 5 over the square root of 5, numerator and denominator. Square root of 2 times square root of 5 is square root of 10. Square root of 5 times square root of 5 is 5. So it's radical 10 over 5. So let's try some more. Number 1, I'm going to break that up into radical 4 over radical 3. Multiply numerator and denominator by radical 3 because that's what's in my denominator. Radical 4 times radical 3 is radical 12. Radical 3 times radical 3 is 3. I'm not done because 12 can be simplified. 12 has a perfect square factor of 4. So that's radical 4 times radical 3 over 3. Square root of 4 is 2, so that's 2 radical 3 over 3. Number 2, what do I do if there's another number in front? Well, I can multiply by that, but that's only going to make my numbers bigger. I really only need to multiply by the radical. So I'm going to multiply by radical 5 over radical 5. In my numerator, I get 16 radical 30. My denominator is 5 times 5 because radical 5 times radical 5 is 5. So that's 16 radical 30 over 25. 30 can't be simplified, and 16 over 25 can't be simplified. So that is my final answer. So I want you to pause and try the next 4. Okay, so number 3, I'm going to multiply by radical 20 over radical 20. That gives me 10 radical 20 over 60, because 3 times 20 is 60. I can simplify radical 20 because it's got a perfect square factor of 4. So that's 10 radical 4, radical 5 over 60. Radical 4 is 2, so that's 10 times 2 radical 5 over 60. 10 times 2 is 20, radical 5 over 60. 20 over 60 can be reduced to 1/3. So it's radical 5 over 3. Number 4, I need to get rid of the radical 5 in the denominator, so I multiply by radical 5 over radical 5. That's 8 radical 5 over 5. And I can't simplify anymore, so I'm done. Number 5, well, I see that I have 6 over 3, so that divides. So that gives me 2 radical 10 over radical 2. I also can divide 10 by 2, so that's just 2 radical 5, because 10 divided by 2 is 5. Number 6, I have a radical in the denominator, so I multiply by radical 8 over radical 8, because I can't divide 3 by 8. So that's 6 radical 24 over 8. I need to reduce 24. There's a perfect square factor of 4. So that's 6 radical 4, radical 6 over 8. Square root of 4 is 2. So that's 6 times 2, radical 6 over 8. That's 12 radical 6 over 8. I can reduce 12 over 8. They both have a common factor of 4. So that is 3 radical 6 over 2. And that's the end of our video for today. If you have any questions, please bring them to class tomorrow.